Hello, brothers and sisters. We are catching up with our Bible study, and we will be talking about the multiplication of the bread and the loaves. This happened right after Jesus sent his disciples to go and to see, to preach the gospel and come uh, into the world to bring the good news and share with everybody. As they came, he commanded them. When they went, he commanded them not to take anything with them and to stay where they go in one place. And if they are not accepted by people, that they should uh, move on to another place. After all this, they came back to him and they reported back to him. And the text says, and the apostles gathered to Jesus and told him all things, both what they had done and what they had taught. And that is what the text says. And he said to them, come aside by yourselves to a deserted place and rest a while. So that I want to concentrate on this for a few seconds because it is an important concept in our life. That is one of the things that the Israelites kept very diligently. Rest. The day of rest was a holy day for them. It was a separated day based on the fact that God had rested on the sixth day. And we can see that Christ gives this directive to his disciples that after a successful journey of preaching the gospel, telling people about the good news, they needed to rest so that they could move on to the next step. And it is very important because uh, the restoration of the human being is an important concept. In Israel, they not only had the rest of the people, which was the seventh day, but they also had the concept of the 7 year. And even the lands and the animals and the slaves and the servants, everybody was entitled to a specific time for rest, and then they would continue the work. That is proven by the modern science that productivity uh, falls if the person does not rest after a certain amount of time working. And Christ observes this not only by the number of the days, because the Israelites were kind of stuck into that model and they had turned it into a rigid law that if someone did not keep that commandment of resting, that they were breaking the law and they were deserving punishment. Christ, in fact, several times directed them, saying that it is not the right thing to do if someone needs help on the Sabbath day, that you do not reach out to them. And we have him with his disciples going through the grain fields and picking grains on Sabbath day and healing people who come to him on the Sabbath day. But it's not that he was against the rest, but that the necessity dictated what needs to be done. And we see the same thing here, where he goes with his disciples on a boat to the other side, to a deserted place to rest. But because everybody follows, and he said to them, come aside yourselves to a deserted place and rest a while, for before they were coming and going, and they did not have time even to eat. So they departed to a deserted place in a boat by themselves. But the multitudes saw them departing, and many knew him, and ran there on foot from all the cities. They arrived before them and came together to him. So these are people who are really desperate. You can imagine them running after Jesus and because of the urgent need for healing and for consolation and for restoration of their dignity, their inner life. Just the relationship with Christ is already something that the humans desire innately, relationship with God, because that's what restores our humanity in us. So besides that, they also had the urge of healing and other infirmities that needed to be addressed. And Jesus was taking care of everything, every request that he was receiving. There is no one time that he turns down somebody and he does not heal and help them. So in this case, Jesus and his disciples did not get the chance of resting because the people came and surrounded him. Now let's see what is his approach to these people. And Jesus, when he came out, saw a great multitude and was moved with compassion for them because they were like sheep not having a shepherd. So he began to teach them many things. That is the approach that Christ, when you look, he looks up to people, he sees them wandering without direction, without someone to take care of them. I have been a shepherd when I was a little younger, teenager, several years, um, herding the sheep for the village, and it is a very interesting job to do because it's double-sided. Number one, you know that the sheep need you, and number two is that sometimes they don't realize that they need you, and they will go crazy, wild, wander everywhere, and there is the danger that can come because of that. You can never allow the sheep by themselves in the woods. Uh, in a very short period of time, a disaster will come on them. They will be attacked by wolves and other beasts in the world in the woods. So the shepherd and sheep concept is very beautiful here, where Christ sees these people uh, vulnerable and unprotected, and he cannot allow himself not to take care of them because they will be endangered. Their life will be endangered. And that concept, if we generalize, we can spread for all humanity, that the humanity is the flock, and Christ is the shepherd, and he's observing everyone, watching everyone. Now we have the concept of the goats and the sheep, and in that you can see, if you have ever studied or done a research on this. I have personally experienced. Unfortunately, I had to be a shepherd. The goats are very much stubborn and they don't obey. They just go their own direction. What happens in the process? They also take after them the sheep, and they can bring them into a danger. So that's what uh, goats and sheep concept is, and the shepherd is a key component to protect them, to guide them, and to take them to places where there is food. Another concept of being a shepherd is that if you do not lead the sheep into places where there is food, and it gets hot during the day, they will cluster together and they will starve. They will not find food for themselves, and it takes a lot of effort to move them to places where they need to go. And so, from God's perspective, we are kind of um, uh, rational sheep. We know what we're doing, but we don't necessarily know where the life-giving food is for us. And it takes God to come become human to show us the source of life that is in Him, and that we need to be connected always to Him. We can function, act as sheep who follow the shepherd, and also as goats that go different directions on their own and get into trouble. The concept that Jesus talks about, an important concept that he talks about, is the relationship between a good shepherd and the sheep. That the good shepherd knows his sheep by name, and also the sheep understand, not understand, but recognize the voice of their shepherd, and they follow him. So here it seems like these people who were struggling through many, many things find the good shepherd and they follow him. And he provides for them not only spiritual food, which we see here that, and he began to teach them many things. He's, he's feeding them, nourishing them internally by explaining to them many things. But also, we can see in a short while that he also addresses their physical needs. When the day was now far spent, his disciples came to him and said, "This is a deserted place, and already the hour is late." So the disciples are worried about the people, but they do not have the right approach. They do not have the right concept about this. Send them away that they may go into the surrounding country and villages and buy themselves bread, for they have nothing to eat. So, to the disciples, these people are the co citizens, co villagers, or whatever they are, and they are looking at them from equals perspective, and they are saying to Jesus that he should send them away so that they can go and find food for themselves. Christ is looking at them from the shepherd's perspective, that they cannot find food themselves. You need to feed them. This is quite interesting that in our modern life there are people who will consider concern themselves with the needs of the others, and there are some who will say, well, oh, how better are they or how worse are they that I need to take care of them? As I feed myself, let them feed themselves. As I take care of myself, let them take care of themselves. But God doesn't look at this the same way. God looks at the world as a loving father who takes care of the others because of the love that he has for us. And so that is the important concept of the feeding that we see here, where the disciples don't necessarily look at this from the same perspective that Christ does, because they are looking at the people from the equal's perspective, and Christ is looking at them from shepherd's perspective, that they need care, and I will take care of them, and you need to take care of them. So he not only feeds these people here, but he also teaches his friends, his disciples, a lesson. Now, at first, he sent them off, telling them to go and teach them about the good news. That's not enough. Sometimes we fall into that trap of being only spiritual and reaching out to people spiritually, and then whatever the response is, then we don't have to do anything with them if they are suffering. The concept of Christianity is holistic. It's the whole thing that we are responsible for one another, towards one another. Human beings are made of both soul and body. If we want people to be in the church so that they will find spiritual nourishment, we need to understand that human beings aren't spirits. They are human because they are made of body and soul, and the combination of the two makes the wholeness of the human being. And with that come all kinds of problems. And that's why probably we try to avoid sometimes the physical aspect of humanity, because in that manifests lots of problems that we don't want to deal with. And that is perhaps the reason that pushes us to think of only spiritual things. But spiritual things aren't necessarily uh, uh, the unnecessarily visible. We don't know what happens in the spiritual realm of human beings. Anthony Bloom, the Metropolitan of England of the Russian Church, very clearly teaches that the body is, in fact, the victim of the soul. It is the soul that is separated from God, and in the result, the passions come down, and and the body suffers because of it. In on our level, all the things that happen around us in human life is a humble servant, is a dwelling place. It's something that continuously struggles and struggles, and it requires feeding, it requires nourishment, it requires rest. And Christ understands both aspects very clearly, and communicates very clearly to his disciples that number one, you need rest because you are made of physical body and soul. You're not only spiritual, and that the physical body is here to serve your purpose. And if you don't take care of it, it will only serve so long, and it will be, uh, unable to serve you anymore. And also, feeding these people is important because, again, they are both soul and body, and the combination of the both is what will uh, determine their salvation. And so, Christ teaches these two important things. Number one, rest. Number two, that we need to take care of our physical body the best we can. And he says to his disciples, but he answered and said to them, you give them something to eat. It's not only feeding them spiritually, it's not about preaching them, it's not about speaking good sermons or rhetorical speeches and then taking off. It is to endure their suffering with them, to be with them on daily basis, and attend to every kinds of needs that they may have, both physical and spiritual. And sometimes this physical is very hard. That's why we don't want to. We kind of try to skip that. And the spiritual is just simple. We just tell them what needs to be done, and how awesome this thing is or how awesome the other thing is. But when the tires hit the road, then it becomes really fish. And that is a problem that we experience sometimes. So what does he say to them? And they said to him, shall we go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give them something to eat? So they are bringing an economic problem to Christ. They are telling him, well, we probably have to wipe out all our savings, right? We have to give everything away in order to feed these people. So are you willing to do this? That is a tricky question, and it's very difficult to answer. Are you willing to give out everything you have? Are you willing to risk your savings? Are you willing to jeopardize your economic status or your ability to sustain yourself economically for the sake of the others? So this is a rhetorical question to Christ, expecting that he will say, well, no, we don't have that money, so forget about what I said. Well, that's not what he says. He says, and then they found, okay, so it says, but he said to them, how many loaves do you have? Go and see. And then when they found out, they said, five and 2 fish. So this is all we have. So Christ doesn't say go above and beyond, overboard, go take a loan from the bank so you can feed these people, and then you don't know how you're going to pay that back. He simply says, do your best. Whatever you have, that's what you need to give to these people. That's all it takes. Give them what you have. Don't say that you don't have anything, and don't go overboard, do something that you cannot bear, but do what you can. In other words, be transparent, be honest, be authentic. Share with them what you have. I have heard a story. This was during wartime, and he was extremely hungry. And he says, when I entered, the first thing my eyes cut off was a cucumber on the desk, on a table. And he says that before even I said hello to my friend, that's the first thing I said to him, are we going to eat that cucumber? And he said, my friend responded positively, said, yes, we are going to have it. And he said, "Well, then let's have it. Let's eat it." And the friend took his time. He was probably a little bit older, and he understood some things that were important. And it took them a long time until they got to the cucumber, because the friend was saying a prayer, and then they were having a conversation. And Anthony says, in this time when I was hungry, I could not take my eye, and there was nothing else I could concentrate. I couldn't wait until he finished to pray so that I could eat the cucumber. And then when he tastes the cucumber, they share it, they break it into two parts, and and they share each part. He says that was the most delicious cucumber I've ever had in my entire life, because of the hunger. But what is telling me, what is teaching me, is that the physical need of the human being is so important. You cannot have a hungry person and you preach them. You need to feed them first. And that is a folk wisdom. When someone comes into your house, it says, you feed them first, then you start a conversation with them, asking how are they doing, instead of, going through, they may be hungry. Now, in American culture, that may not be true, because they probably stopped at Dunkin' Donuts or McDonald's on the way and they are full, they're fine. Or they have some snacks in their car, they probably ate. In the older times, that was not true. That was not the reality. People traveled long time, they probably carried something in their knapsack, and they ate it halfway through, and then they figured the rest of the way they will go and they will arrive, so they will eat in the place where they are going. And it is that Christ does not talk about only, because does not only concentrate on spiritual things. Eats a piece of bread and runs away and never comes back to you again. And he says that's not okay. You cannot just come for a thing and take it and then you disappear. But what the Phoenician woman teaches us, she compares herself to a domestic dog. That a domestic dog serves faithfully and eats from the crumbs that fall from the table. The master will not say that, oh, you have to serve me, but I'm not going to feed you. And in this in that way, it's a double-edged sword, where it's not only spiritual and it's not only physical, but it's the combination of both. And it is very important to keep the balance between the two, and address both at the same time, this way. So this, besides the fact that Christ multiplies the bread and wondrously it amazes us, but there are lessons hidden in this that is very important. As I said, rest. He emphasizes rest, that his disciples have gone out and they have preached the gospel. Now they needed to rest. That doesn't happen quite the way that he was imagining, I guess, or planning. But then he also takes care of the people who are following them, listening to what he's teaching, and he's also feeding them, so that both go together hand on hand. Uh, The third lesson that we learn is that it doesn't matter how many loaves of bread do you have. You need to be authentic and open and share what you have. Do not say, well, because I don't have 200 denarii worth bread, I'm not going to do anything, or go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread that you don't have the money for. He's saying that you share that one cucumber that you have on a table, like I said in the story. That's all you got, that's all you share. And that will become the most delicious cucumber in your life, or in the life of the other person with whom you shared. And that will be so satisfying, not only on a physical level, but on the emotional level, on the level of the um, uh, on the ethical level, and you will remember that person who shared that one last piece of bread with you, and you will always be grateful towards that person. So that is a very deep phenomenon. We live in America, and food is abundant. There's nothing more than food, and sometimes we take it for granted. We don't understand the essential importance of it. But in this case, Christ is really giving so much importance and so much deep meaning to this sharing of the last loaves of bread that you have and the last fish that you have with others. And in that way, that's where it multiplies. That's where it gets the blessing. When you open heartedly share everything you have with other people. Then they said five and two fish. Then he commanded them to make them to sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in ranks, in hundreds and in fifties. And when he had taken the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven, blessed and broke the loaves, and gave them to his disciples to set before them. And the 2 fish he divided among them all. So this is the next lesson that Christ is teaching here, both to his disciples and us who are called to be his disciples also, that yes, rest is important, that yes, we need to take care of both soul and body, physical and spiritual aspects of our life. The third, that we authentically are to share what we have, but the gratitude goes to God. And that's all, and only then the cycle is complete, the circle is complete, where we do all the right things, and then we great with others. What is the deep meaning of this? Is the fact that everything belongs to God, that those 5 loaves and those 2 fish are also God's property, and this is God's people, and that the authenticity, honesty, love, openness to share, and all those things come because of the understanding that what you possess does not belong to you, it is given to you by God. And that you, like God, need to be able to share it with other people. And that's what he teaches here, that the gratitude goes to God. Because when we forget that what we have is given to us as a gift, free gift by God, we have earned our free gift, then is when we cling to it, and we close our fingers, and we become possessed by our own possessions. And so they all ate and were filled. And they took up 12 baskets full of fragments and of the fish. Now those who had eaten the loaves were about 5,000 men. An amazing thing that happens is that if you do all the right things and you give all the credit to God, the author of life, the one who gives all the gifts, the giver of the gifts, and you do not fixate on the gift itself, but the giver of the gifts, then the gifts multiply. And that is what our Lord is teaching today in the multiplication of the bread, that we are to share and thank the giver of the gifts. May God bless you. Let us pray together. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. For yours is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, now and forever, and to the ages of ages. Amen. Dear brothers and sisters, I will see you tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock. I will continue to do this as long as I can, and then we will perhaps go into a different format where we can have a community meeting conversing, but keep this format as well because some people prefer just to listen and some people may want to have a conversation. May God bless you. I will see you tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock.